April 4th, 2025. Well, we've had Liberation Day. Does everybody feel liberated? Trump's grand tariff plan to equalize the injustice against the world and the United States and so forth has been declared, and I guess it'll be shortly going into effect next week. At least parts of it. I think there's a little bit of a phase in with Europe and other places, but it's rather quickly. And so at least we know what it is now. And at least unless somebody is foolish enough to try to retaliate. Um, and we have different levels of tariffs calculated on all these different countries. And it's basically largely based on as I understand it, a mathematical formula taking into account the trade imbalance. So it's not literally like if, oh, I don't know, a country X had a 25% tariff on American cars, so we will put a 25% tariff on theirs or something like that. It's much more complicated in a way. It is supposed to take into account everything from the tax structures of the countries to other kind of obstacles or laws or limitations which have the effect of this. And the way they're doing it, they're just taking the actual trade imbalance, as I understand it, and running it through a formula and calculating a percentage. And then to be generous and fair, he's simply cutting that percentage in half so as to give a reasonable tariff penalty to put on all these countries in order to equalize the trade. Now, what's a little bit up in the air is this a negotiating ploy or is this an actual plan, largely to raise revenue and as a permanent state of the play, let's say. And of course, the initial stock market reaction on the first day was pretty decidedly negative, which was expected. Maybe it was more negative than a lot of people expected. I think the main thing is the tariffs were stiffer than what the market had believed. And so, as you say, you expect more from Trump and you'll get it, right? And so, I have, as in my previous video, by the way, I've been out for a little while. Didn't do one in the middle because I had a pretty bad cold and I just didn't think it'd be a good time to do one. And so, but I'm going to go ahead and jump back in now at this point. Yeah, I was trying to explain what I think was going to happen. I'm not exactly enthusiastic about this. Of all the Trump agenda points, as I point out, this is the one I like least. Perhaps because it's the most distinct from traditional Republican conservatism, where the other things are, I think, pretty close to what we naturally believed in, I thought. But maintain the border, eliminating waste, and having a strong national defense, and a prudent foreign policy looking at our interests as a primary point for the most part. So, and I think he's doing all that. On this one, I understand he's had a lifelong vendetta practically about this whole issue. I can remember going back to the 1980s, him being on shows like Phil Donahue, and I think he was also on Oprah, which I didn't watch that one, but he's been on TV expounding his viewpoint that we're the victims of really bad trade policies, which have eliminated a lot of American jobs. And the other problem has been the multinational corporations have been fairly eagerly exporting jobs overseas, much to the detriment of the American worker. And the latter part is true. And while I definitely support the idea of doing something about it, there's always something, and then there's something else. So, but the fact is, he's the president, and that's what's underway at the moment. I can see we're already beginning to have some congressional opposition. Even certain old guard people in the Republican Party are starting to rally at this point. Although at the present, I don't think they can override a presidential veto. So at the moment, I think he's in pretty good shape on it. Um, any rate, so at any rate, I'll get into the description of what I think about this. If you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Or you can also follow me on Rumble. I post there as well, whichever you prefer. Yes. Okay. So my biggest concern about all this is maintaining the control of the Republican Party versus the Democrat Party. More than anything else, I believe, and why I vote the way I do, is I believe the Democrat Party, particularly in its current incarnation, let's say the post-Obama Party, let's say there's Obama, or let's say starting with Obama and then going into Biden and the current, those young Turks that they think they ought to take over from the old guard like Schumer, and Pelosi, well, they're even worse. And I think that the fact of the matter is keeping them out of power is the most important thing. So within that spectrum of possibilities, once we can do that, then anything we can do to improve things in general and principle beyond that is great. But it isn't necessarily true that trying for, let's say, an ideal outcome is necessarily the best thing to do straightforward. Because if the pain in the treatment is bad enough, you know, the treatment gets stopped before the cure is affected. I mean, if the treatment kills the patient, if you will, the fact it only might kill the disease is kind of irrelevant. So I'm a little bit worried that if it brings the Democrats back into power in the off-year election and then in the next election afterwards, we could be in a lot worse shape than if we hadn't even tried. Okay, that's kind of what I'm kind of looking at here. So will this be popular? And that the problem I have is right now, I think last poll numbers, it looked like Trump was running pretty good in the poll numbers approval. He's doing fairly good at the moment, and I think he'll probably continue to for some time. So I don't know that that is actually the problem. And as I predicted in my last video, the Democrats are already jumping on this as an issue in terms of these tariffs. And at the moment, the damages will come on somewhat, I think, gradually. For one thing, various importers and so forth have been stocking up, I think, in anticipation of the tariffs. And in fact, they may actually put a more negative look on the first quarter GDP numbers than they really should, because, as I understand, these numbers will be a negative, I think, to GDP, the extra imports, which will then probably shrink in the second quarter, giving a more positive number for that one than would be otherwise. So it doesn't mean it'll be positive, it just means it will improve or would be. It's like well, anyway, it's an anomaly in the formula as I understand it. So, okay, but as soon as the supplies of these imported items run out, and we have to import ones under the tariffs, we're going to see just about everything increasing in price, I think. Uh, and there may be some attempts to mitigate this increase. Of course, this is all dependent on the fact that these things really do go into effect and stay there. And again, what the probabilities on that are. But let's just start for the moment. Let's say they do. You're going to see across the board increases in prices for just a lot of things. Look at all the stuff we get from China, all the cheap odds and ends, tools and clothes, and not even the expensive stuff, just the basic stuff there. That's going to have to go up in price because the tariffs are high enough that unless the Chinese are literally making a profit killing on everything, they really can't afford, I don't think, to undercut that degree. If you had an extra 10% tariff, they might be able to eat most of that. The level we're talking about now is just too high. The other problem is the tariffs on the alternative sources, which Walmart might go to China and say, you just eat all that tariff stuff, or else we'll go somewhere else. Well, we're going to go to Vietnam, Thailand. Well, guess what? They got tariffs on them too. So in other words, I don't think the tariff differences between the alternative sources and China are great enough that they have much room to maneuver. They're going to have to it pass on the prices. It'd probably take a hit. So you're going to have a double whammy. Their stock will probably fall because their earnings will drop. At the same time, they'll still have to increase prices, which is a double whammy, right? Everybody's mad at them. At the same time, they're not really making more money. They're actually making less money. And on the car thing, I've discussed that a lot in the last, but the same thing is true. There's so many foreign parts in American cars, your classic Chevys, Chryslers, and Fords, that in many instances, the prices are going to have to go up. But the question is, do you do it model by model based on what the real facts are in this case, or does the company themselves just put a tariff overhead on all their products and smear it out over everything? That's up in the air. I discussed that before, and I guess what I saw on CNBC, they're discussing the same plan. So we don't know what way they're going to do, but that's the way that's going to happen. And it's just on so many other things. And so these increased costs are going to show up in inflation numbers and will affect other things. This may also have the effect of pushing the country to lower economic growth and theoretically even a recession potentially. We don't know how the stock market's going to go from the first day. I'm not optimistic in the short run, but some people think we're at a support level. Given this impact, I'm not so sure. Plus, you have to look at what all the foreign markets are going to do, and a lot of other issues about that. So that's going to be an ongoing problem. And while in the short term it won't affect Trump's popularity, I think over time it will. And we're already beginning to see a few defections from the normal Republicans that tend to defect. But I guess they'll have to get to the level where they could override a veto before it'll change anything. Um, Now, let's look at another aspect to it, the idea of negotiation. Given the way these are being laid out, I question, unless Trump is going to be incredibly lenient and take almost anything as a victory, and therefore remove tariffs proportionately, yeah, you may have some scale backs. For instance, countries are trying to negotiate, and probably more so will. But the question is, given the way this is being structured, it isn't, again, if they have a 10% tariff on a product, let's say a car or something, or just across the board, and maybe we only had uh, you know, what if they said, well, we'll take off that tariff and have no tariff on your product at all? That's still not going to satisfy us because they're taking the actual effective outcome, which includes everything from tax rates, the actual tariff structures, uh, other marketing difficulties in the environment, and the very fact that their own populations may or may not want our product. I mean, do you think the reason why the Japanese primarily buy Japanese cars is because they hate it? They want to buy their own car, and in Japan's case, this is something I should have looked up, and we'll maybe get into that later. I'm questioning: do they actually sell the exact models there that they do here? I mean, I'm thinking that they may have smaller models over there. I mean, the origin of the Japanese car imports in the early days, and even the German Volkswagen days years ago, was that they were small cars. And over there, they have limited spaces and stuff. So I think, whereas the U.S. likes, big, nice, roomy cars for the most part, in many cases. And so I think there's a lot of reasons why their preferences are just different. Plus, there's a national patriotic. I mean, Trump definitely believes in buy American. I think they believe in buy Japanese or buy German. And so you're going to have those issues. Other issues are probably purely prejudice. Some of them are maybe a mixture. I mean, for instance, on food issues, we may have different FDA standards than they do and stuff like that, or their equivalent organization. And even there, we're changing ours probably under RFK Jr. He has a lot of things that we've been doing he thinks are bad. So in some cases, they've been wanting to go more to the European standard, I understand, on certain like ingredients and whatever. And, so I don't want to go too much into that. I'm just saying that I think it may be very difficult, even if they want to agree to what we might want. I don't know that they're going to be able to in a meaningful way. They can come part way, but I think there's a limit to what they could actually do viably in their own system. And so that leads to the inevitable conflict, and we really are in a trade war of a sort. But if I were to give them advice at the moment, would be to negotiate the best deal they can potentially and not retaliate at the moment. But I don't know they're capable of not doing it. I mean, the idea of not retaliating, and this will be something, some people may not like what I'm saying here, the strategy of not doing that might be to let the whole tariff strategy simply collapse under its own weight. That is, take the hit for a few months and wait for the U.S. consumer to basically rebel, and, and they might get back to what they want. I mean, that's a possibility, but that's what I would advise. I doubt that's what they're going to do. Of course, if they do retaliate, then I'm sure that Trump will be forced to respond in kind in order to keep credibility. And of course, that's where you do get into sort of a trade war. And it may well be a lose-lose situation. There may be no winner. That is, say, both sides go into a recession. And that is possible. I don't think that they're going to come out on top, but I don't know that this will be a winner for us either. So anyhow, that's kind of the way I see this thing. That But I do think it's going to give the Democrats an opening, but they probably won't get a whole lot of an opening until the actual effects of this actually are felt in the inflation numbers and actually in purchase prices of items of the consumer, and then we'll see how that goes. So anyway, I'll be wrapping this up for now, and as always, I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble, and the address of my social media accounts are listed in the description below. I post most frequently between videos on X, so, little comments I have and so forth, so you can certainly follow me on those. Thanks a lot, and all for now.